Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We are thrilled to have Lucas Ventouras here with us. He's running for to hopefully unseat Lalota, which we all want to see happen.
Battery
I'm
100%.
Allison Canis. I started Indivisible Long Island here about over a year ago now in response to this second Trump administration. And we've grown over this last year and have partnered with many different organizations on Long Island. And we are,
Battery
doing,
100%.
uh, we are, sorry, something sounded odd. Um, we are actively, protesting and doing events. Like just a couple of weeks ago, we had a big, very successful immigration event where OLA came and Pat coordinated it at the United Methodist Church. It was absolutely fantastic. Um, and we're doing protests with other organizations every week. And now that we're getting into the primary season, we want to start learning more about the candidates and see how we can do what we can do as an activist community here, which I think is one of the things that the Democratic committees could do better on is partnering more with the activist community. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk to us. And with that being said, I think we all want to know a little bit more about you, Lucas. We want to know why you decided to run, a little bit more about your background, and about who you are. I just want to say another little housekeeping note. We encourage you guys to put questions in the chat. I'm going to try to be monitoring those as much as possible. But our team here, Nick and Karine and others, have put together a list and a category list of questions. So after after Lucas, when you do your presentation or your talk, we're going to throw it to Karine and Nick. Karine's going to talk more about just general things to get to know you more, and then Nick's going to get into more of the policy questions that we have for you, and then we can open it up to the chat if there's things that weren't covered in any of that. Hope that sounds good. Thanks, Lucas. Up now, the floor is
Absolutely.
yours.
Yeah. So, just wanted to thank all you. Can everyone hear me all right? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. Um, just wanted to,
Excuse me, if
sorry.
everybody can please mute
Yeah.
their devices, that would be very helpful. We're hearing a lot of background noise. Thank you.
Okay. Cool.
That sounds better.
Yeah. So thank you guys for coming out tonight. I want to be a little brief so we can get right into questions. But my name is Lucas Ventouras. I have lived in this district and am, the only candidate in the race, unlike our congressman who lives in this district and is from this district. I had a very normal childhood. I grew up in East Northport, went to NYU for American political history, went to St. John's for law school. And during that time, I had a lot of different experiences working in journalism, in civil rights law, in a congressional office, and on several campaigns. And it was through my work on these campaigns, excuse me, that I really began to see a disconnect between what I felt on the ground as a voter, as a young person, as a person who wants to see progress in this country, and what was happening in a lot of our campaigns. And a bit about me is I'm the son of an immigrant, I'm the son of refugees, and this country and the democracy and the health of democracy in this country is very important to me. And I started working on campaigns around the time of the Trump era, and I kept seeing that we were losing to candidates like Lalota and Zeldin and Trump himself. And I felt very confused by it at first, and I began to join a lot of these campaigns, and I began to see a disconnect between and a lot of times people have taken this the wrong way. They've thought, oh, you're criticizing individual candidates that we've had in the past. I'm not. I think everyone's lovely. But I think that we should be able to hold up our hands and say earnestly and humbly that we've made some mistakes. We've made some messaging mistakes. We've made strategic mistakes. We haven't always gone into parts of the district. If we're just going to focus on, our district in Suffolk right now, we haven't gone into parts of the district where people, whether they be minorities, of religion, racial minorities, or by minorities, including people such as young people who haven't been heard. I feel that we haven't made the necessary inroads as a party and as specific candidates with these groups. Um, and I fancied myself well, well enough informed on the issues. I'm a hard worker, and I felt if no one else is going to do it the way you see it, sometimes why don't you do it yourself? Why don't you throw your hat in the ring? Why don't you see how viable you can be as a candidate and how viable the message you think works can be in this district? And what I found is that it's very viable. People have bought into what we've been talking about um, because it's a community-based effort. I am not a candidate who centers this campaign or this election on myself, rather that I want to be a servant, a servant of Suffolk County, and I want to be a servant for the people not just who vote for me, but the people who will be my constituents. And that's why I'm in this race. I hope that my passion is evident, my passion to serve, my passion to lead, and my passion to get results, um, policy results passed and implemented. And without you know going too long, that's a quick little intro about me. I really want to hear your questions, so the floor is back on you guys now.
That's awesome. Thanks, Lucas. Um, Kareen, do you want to jump in with some of your questions?
Yep. Hi, Lucas. Thanks again for coming. And thanks to
Hello.
Washington. She helped hook us up and get this scheduled. And I appreciate the time tonight that you're spending with us. So I just have some general questions. We kind of broke it up, that just background character kind of questions, just kind of get to know you. Because I know that we haven't seen you before, so I don't know a
Right.
lot of you. So these are just really general interview questions. So don't be like, I know it's a little cheesy, but we have some things you have to know. Okay. What areas of public policy are you personally passionate about?
I'm personally passionate about a couple of things. One thing I would say is I'm actually very passionate about civil rights and constitutional policy. I think that is a bit of my area of expertise, having gone to law school for constitutional law. I was the president of the Constitution Society. So that delves into a couple of different things. And without being vague, I'll say currently that things like the ICE injustices very much interest me. And I've had experience in the law office I worked at. Um, working against DHS and against ICE, who wrongfully detained and arrested an American citizen. And I'm very interested as well in what I would say is affordability policies, which is specifically healthcare. I want to implement Medicare for all, or first do a public option Medicare for all those who want it, and then transition to Medicare for all. Um, Another thing I'm very passionate about is housing policy. I want to do something called repeal the Faircloth Amendment, which allows the federal government to more easily spend federal dollars on creating low-income housing and just affordable housing in general. And I would also say child rearing policies, things like the child tax credit, paid leave for parents. It's very important, as an aspiring parent that I am, that parents, especially in this very expensive world, especially on Long Island where it's very expensive, have the opportunity to have as many children as they please, and for those children to be given a fair shot, equal opportunity. That includes things as well like education policy. Not to be vague, I'm sure you guys will get specific, but those are a couple of things I'm interested in.
Excellent. Okay. And what do you believe are the core values and responsibilities for someone elected to this office?
Ooh, well, I think the core values you need to have are um, a leadership. And by leadership, specifically, that means sometimes being willing to go against your own party, to have a sense of, you know, being tethered to this district. I think that the values that a congressman needs to have here are, one of hard work, one of humility, one of just emotional understanding. I think a lot of times that people and members of Congress get very much in a bubble in the Beltway. They become disconnected from the people. And I think that a good leader, the values of a good leader are someone who always listens, someone who's humble, someone who knows what they don't know, and someone who's willing to be incorrect and is willing to be pushed back upon. I think that's one thing I definitely bring to the table, is that I'm willing to be wrong, and I'm willing for this endeavor to be really a collective effort, not just me saying things and dictating things, but people coming to my office. If I win, I'll have a kitchen table policy wherein everybody's invited and we're all part of the process. And I think some of those values and some of those attributes, bringing that to Congress would be not unheard of by any means, but definitely rare in our modern era where politicians seem to be very focused on just money and fundraising and uh, winning re-election, whereas I think a good congressman needs to be focused on uh, delivering for the community and implementing good policy.
Okay. And that kind of leads me into my next question is, why you? what qualities do you possess that you believe would make you a successful congressperson?
Well, I think it's a good question also because I think a lot of people say, why you? You're a young guy. How can you do this? Why can you do this? Why should it be you? Why shouldn't it be someone else with God knows 40 years of experience doing God knows what? And I think one thing we've seen is that we've had a lot of candidates who have that traditional experience, but they don't think they have the hunger that I bring to the table. I don't think they have the passion for the issues that I have. I don't think they bring that to the table. And again, people get very finicky. Oh, you're being mean against past candidates. Like, I've met all the past candidates. I've worked on a lot of the past elections. Everybody's great. But I think being a young person whose life is intrinsically tied to what happens in the federal government in the next 10 years, it just makes me, not for self-interested reasons, but it just makes me see and understand what's going on the ground better than someone who perhaps is wealthy and more out of touch on what's going on with the average day-to-day American. I also just think that I'm a hard worker. I always do my research. I do my homework. I want to be the most informed person in the room. And I don't bring with it a know-it-all energy. I bring with it an inquisitive attitude. And I think that it should be me because I really care about these issues. This is the place I've grown up in and around, and I want it to continue to thrive and prosper as a place where young families can raise, they're young and can grow. And like my parents were able to come here, my father from Greece, my mother, whose parents are refugees from Greece, who came from the city, to just raise two boys, healthy, happy, milk in the fridge, diapers, cars paid for, gas is cheap. The American dream. Not everybody's American dream is a white picket fence, but I think everybody's American dream should be able to be facilitated. And I think that that is an understanding that I have intrinsically, not just as a first gen American, but as a young person who has an entire life to build ahead of me. And I think that I just know that I'll be the most hardworking person to deliver results for Suffolk. And that's really all I can say.
Yeah, and your question kind of brings me to the next one. It was just like, who is your mentor? Like, who's your mentor? Who's your hero that brought you to where, like, this is what I'm going to do because you learned from them, or who set that example for you?
I have a couple people. I have political mentors and then I have life mentors. And I
Hmm.
think my parents and my grandfather, my mother's father, they're three people who always told me, specifically my grandfather, who was a refugee, escaped war, escaped a civil war, and saw really just atrocities at such a young age, things I couldn't fathom. He always had a sense of positivity, and he was a Republican, mind you, but he always would make fun of me for being like a communist, but then he would joke and say, no, but I know you want the best for this country, as do I. We'll always see eye to eye. And he's someone who, not just politically, but just in life, the amount of adversity he went through over and over and over again to build a life for his three daughters and then eventually his grandchildren, it was just very inspiring to me. And he taught me so much about history and politics, and I think it just manifested itself naturally. Also because my mom's a therapist, and I just used to see how much of an impact she would have on people's lives, that these interests sort of melded, and I began to think of a life of public service around the time of like January 6th because I was just so appalled at everything. And I have political mentors as well. I have this historian named Harvey K, who is a FDR historian and in in Wisconsin, and he's helped me develop my political theory behind just the New Deal and how important that era was, where the people in the working class were intrinsically tied to the politicians, and there was a real give and take there. As well as Fred Burrington, who's a lawyer I worked under for 2 years, who is a giant in civil rights out in Long Island, and he really taught me what it means to show up. And I just think those three groups or those three people were very formative to me.
Excellent. Well, um, I and I appreciate your answers. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to get back to Allison, and if we can, everyone mute
Thanks,
because I'm
Jen.
hearing a lot of background noises. If people can just mute, that would be better. I'm having a hard time hearing Lucas.
So am I. Thanks, Karina. I was going to say that too. Um, I was just going to take, before I hand it over to you, Nick, I was looking at a couple of the questions in the chat. Um, and Natalie, one of our partners, who's amazing. She's actually we're helping her with No Kings, and I'll tell you about with No Kings 3. I'll tell everybody about that at the end of the call. Um, she wants to know where your office will be located and why it's such a big deal for people to care so much about where you live, since most of the time you're going to be in DC anyway.
Mhm. Um, so as for where the office is located, I'm not privy to right now whether, there's a lease or anything like that in different places. But where I could envision where I would want to be is I would like to have three offices, to be completely honest. I would like to have one in the Western towns, Smithtown, Huntington, places like that. And I would like to have one in Brookhaven. And then I would like to have one in Riverhead so that it kind of services both forks. And I just think three centrally located offices where, I've worked in a congressional office, I've interned in a congressional office, so I understand the casework, the amount of casework that comes into an office and how important it is for there somewhere to be, especially in a district geographically the size of ours, for there to be somewhere central where you can go and air your grievances, whatever it may be. And they're very important. Sometimes people call congressional offices and they just want to yell at you, and that's their right. And sometimes people have real problems that they need solved, and it doesn't make sense for someone from Flanders to drive to Melville, personally. So that's what I think. And as for why it's important to live in the district, um, I think of it in two ways. A, we would be massive hypocrites if we ran someone from outside the district after we just spent 4 years castigating Lolota for not being able to vote for himself. So just on just a purely we need to be consistent and not hypocritical sense, I've been banging the drum about him not living in the district. I think it's ridiculous. So I don't think that we should stoop to that level. And also, I think living in the district, having a stake, a literal stock in what goes on in that district, it's important. We've seen stories of members of Congress who all but relocate to Virginia when they're in the House, and they could be a congressperson from Utah, New York, Washington State, California, or Maine, but they essentially permanently reside in Virginia. And why it's important for me, and why I've always made the pledge, because I'm going to be a really young guy in Congress, and I don't really want to go to these parties with people 3 times my age. So, but I will be coming home every weekend uh, to make sure, A, that I can be here for the district, and B, because at the end of the day, I want to be a regular person that is is from and is of the district. And yeah, like someone just said it, it beat me to it. It's just important to be in and around. People can see you, people can talk to you, people can yell at you if they want, they can give you suggestions. I very much am of the opinion that public service is all encompassing, and when you sign up for that, you sign up for everything that comes with it. And we have too many people like Lolota who hide from the I'm a young guy, but I understand the grave and great responsibility that comes with being a public servant of almost 800,000 constituents. That means you have to be around. They need to be able to see you, touch you, feel you, make sure that you are a tangible person that they can interact with. And that's why you need to live in the district and be consistently in the district, giving town halls and just living and being around.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, we really miss having the town halls, and the fact that the fact that Lolota's office, our closest one, is Hauppauge. I mean,
Right.
we don't really protest there. It's too far for us. So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah. So Riverhead would be great, and hopefully we won't be protesting in Riverhead if it's you there.
right, right.
But I
Hopefully, I
just
won't give you any reason to protest me
yeah,
at all. So.
exactly. Thank you. Please don't. But I do want to want to reiterate one of the comments here. Um, that um, that we really like that you are open to hearing from us and partnering with the community more. And I do
Of
think, like
course.
I said at the beginning of this, one of the ways that you can do that is by partnering with these activist communities. So I hope that you continue the relationship with us so that we can be a conduit for the rest of the
hmm
community and bring you
I mean,
some.
that's my background. That's what brought me into politics. At NYU, I was the founder of Students Demand Action, which is the same umbrella of Moms Demand Action in every town for gun safety. The activist base is more of where I come from. I've obviously worked on campaigns and in the congressional office and in the media, but my entry into politics came from being a high schooler, seeing school shootings, seeing global warming, understanding that things aren't going to change unless you speak up. And I think that not just the activist base, but also just the young cohort of Americans is a group that I'm really trying to reach out to, both in my campaign and hopefully if we're successful in my governance, is that we just need to bring a lot more people back into the process who feel alienated, not just young people, but people of color, people of different religions. I just think everyone right now feels alienated, to be completely honest. Some groups more than others, but I think everyone needs to be made to feel like they're part of a greater goal and just a community. I think we're really missing community from politics. So I would love to continue to work with you guys for sure.
Great, thanks. We welcome that. Um, and I think I've covered the stuff in the chat for now. And so I'll hand it over to Nick for some policy questions. Thanks, Nick.
Hey, Lucas.
And
Good seeing you again.
likewise.
Just so that everybody knows, like the topics that we have pre-set up are federal policing, immigration, taxes, women's health, healthcare, campaigning, and then you just brought up gun violence, so I have a question that I'm going to roll in on the end,
Sure.
if we have enough time.
Sure.
With the federal policing, would you support a bill that prevents federal law enforcement from wearing masks that, with the only exceptions being during no-knock warrants with the judge's express permission, or during inclement weather, right? But they've got to present themselves when they're performing law enforcement actions.
Yes, I would absolutely agree to that. There's just no reason. There's just no reason to be masked. There is no threat if you have a signed judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant, which is a big mistake that people are making in thinking that administrative warrants are uh, sufficient. You need to have a signed judicial warrant, and nowhere in that constitutionally does it say you have the right to cover up. You need to show who you are, identify who you are, to carry out that arrest. So I would absolutely make sure that masks are taken off of federal agents.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody who's just jumping in. If I could remind you to go ahead and mute your mics. Thank you. Um, does anyone in the chat have some specific questions? Some specific questions about policing, anything maybe related to ICE that they wanted to ask? I was hoping that'd give us enough
I
time
could
for the
follow
chat.
up on that. I
Yeah,
could
go ahead,
follow up
Allison.
on the question on the answer on the topic of face coverings. So I think that would be incredible if we could actually get a policy or a law like that passed. How would you do that? Where would that start? And how would we get that passed? And how could we help you?
Okay, the last part of that question is probably the most interesting part, is because no policy happens in a vacuum. And I could
Mhm.
go to Washington with the best of intentions of like these progressive policies I want to implement, so on and so forth. Every congressperson is really bound by two things: the money that they raise and need to raise, and overwhelming public pressure. Oftentimes, money wins out because it's more salient, because public pressure doesn't do enough to push members of Congress. So I would say one thing that's really important as members of Congress that is a very overlooked part, but I think a lot of us get this, is the bully pulpit and the energy you expend on communication and articulation of issues and the importance of doing certain things. Like I said, I can get there, and I think a lot of us, you'd say more so in the activist class, are enraged and they don't want the masks on. They don't want the masks on agents, but for whatever reason, there is a hesitance, or let's say in a vacuum, there is a hesitancy from members of Congress. They don't want to put masks for whatever reason. It's going to hurt, big mask corporations, right? Like this is a theoretical. What you need to do is make sure that they feel the heat of not taking the correct vote. And I think oftentimes we have assorted members of Congress who we agree with on policy. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
please. I'm trying to figure out how I can mute everyone. Can you please mute everybody, please? I'm trying to see if I can do it from my end. Okay, sorry to interrupt you, Lucas.
No,
No,
they're just
no
talking
worries.
about he wants, ICE agents to not be masked. Like
I don't
that's
want to call anybody out, but
Have ID.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, somebody is talking in the
just like
background.
police officers.
Diane, on your iPad, you need to mute, please.
Yeah, I'm glad you could see that. I couldn't see who it was. Okay. Um, I think we have quiet. Would you continue, please?
Yes. Okay. So I'll speed this up. Essentially, the biggest part is the buy-in. So what you guys can do and what we can do is to make sure that members of Congress are consistently feeling the heat of not taking the right vote. I think of, our other Democratic members of Congress on Long Island right now. They felt the heat of taking the wrong vote immediately after they took the DHS funding votes because they realized whatever calculation they made to make the vote was the wrong calculation when when juxtaposed with public outcry. So that's one thing that you guys can do to answer that part, which is I think the most important thing to get other members of Congress to move. But how you do it again, other than broadcasting and branding and making sure that people are aware of what the issues are and what the severity of the issues and what is needed to fix these issues or to tamp down on these issues. What I can do also, and what I will do, what I promise to do is if you guys come to me and say masks on agents is our number one issue right now, it's overwhelmingly, I'm getting the heat. Everyone's telling me you need to do something. We know you're on the right side of this. You can push me also to push people in the caucus to, I have no issue going against people in the caucus and articulating exactly what the more activist idea of what policy changes are needed or what policy needs to be implemented. And so what I can really do is push the caucus while you push the caucus from the outside, if that makes sense. Um, but I'm very open to these policies. So I'm not someone that you have to push to get there. I think the main thing that we should be looking at is how we work together to get these things actually passed instead of sort of trying to get something passed because we all want it to, but then we're disappointed because token Democrats are voting against it. We need to know that everything we want passed requires an offensive, if that makes sense.
Awesome. So I want to move on to immigration. I think that it's such a crazy large thing, but what is your picture? What would you want to do big picture wise with immigration, right? Yeah, maybe like how would you address things different at the border versus inside the country? Uh, I understand asylum and all those things, but let's just talk a regular person coming back and forth, that's from Mexico.
Well, well, first and foremost, I don't believe in carrying out immigration policy with violence being the mode of transportation, if that makes sense. I think that being undocumented in this country, it's a civil crime. It's not a criminal charge. So I think the fact that we are treating people who are undocumented in this country as if they are purely violent criminals in of themselves, that is wrong. But as someone who descends from immigrants very closely in my family lineage, I do understand that there are massive changes needed in our immigration system. And I think being able to say that change is needed without going down the rabbit hole of fear mongering about immigrants and crime, crime is a huge problem in this country in a lot of places. But I think solely basing that on immigrants to make a greater point about why we need strict immigration enforcement is just the wrong way to go. I think I just think the country as a whole is fluctuates with its immigration, whether it's pro or against. But I think we do all intrinsically understand this is an immigrant nation. We are one of the few immigrant nations in this country, and I think of laws like IRA passed in the 90s, which basically makes it harder for people to be seasonal laborers moving back and forth between, you said Mexico, right? For instance, between Mexico and let's say Baja California and Southern California. Um, these are certain laws that basically trap people. So I'm looking at ways like overturning that law and making, let's say, the apps that you use to begin the initiation process when you come to this country, making those not impossible to use, but also pointing the finger at the fact that rhetoric is used for political gain, but then you also have big business that wants to use undocumented labor for cheap labor,
Yeah.
and the fact that
Um,
there are forces pushing the dysfunction in our immigration system because they maximize profit off of it. And I think that's something that we don't really talk about enough. And we need to start pointing the finger at people who basically are profiting off of indentured servitude, which I think is just wrong.
Amy's got a great follow-up question to that.
Sure.
What is some organizations that we should support to help immigrants on the path to legal status?
So I don't. forgive me, I don't remember too many off the top of my head. But I think we we can support federally because I thought that was also a question. Can we? What can we do? I think having someone I think it's important that we have a Democrat win regardless, right? But I think the Democrat we choose is very important. And I'm a very intentional and specific person, and I have genuine policy ideas and understandings and experiences in some of my work. And I think sending someone to DC who specifically understands that there's a rot in our immigration system and people are profiting off of it where and also people are suffering from it because they just want to come here. Some people want to come here, make money, go back, which is fine. They should be allowed to. And some people want to come here because they believe in the American dream, like my grandfather did. And both of those things should be able to be facilitated. We have people paying taxes and they never get anything back, and then they are villainized as bleeding the system. Whereas we have people who are quite literally bleeding the system by using indentured servitude basically is what it amounts to. And so, I think sending someone who knows that the immigration system is broken and is not just kind of going by based on like consultant talking points and has these lived experiences, I think is important. I think which Democrat we pick is important because the way they legislate will be different, let's just say.
Yeah, awesome. So just had the question pop up. Just type your questions in the chat. I've got a list that I'm keeping here. And as we roll through the topics, if I think the question fits into that topic, I'm asking it at that point. So with that, we're gonna move over to taxes. And I think Ron, I had this question. How do you feel about Loyola taking credit in multiple commercial for tax credits, the SALT tax credits, that actually took away from Long Island taxpayers? Well, how do you feel about the SALT tax credit?
Well, I mean, you said it right there, right? If it's taking money away from Long Islanders, then, you know, I don't support
It's
it.
kind of the same thing as what Trump has been doing.
Right. Well, so this is what I have to say, and this is what I've been saying about it. Let's say, well, he didn't put money back in our pockets. But even if he had put money back in our pockets, oh, I put $4,000 back in your pockets. Well, you basically took 20,000 out of our back pockets with increased premiums. The fact that insurance is skyrocketing, groceries are up, everything is up, inflation has not been tamped down upon, and we have the tariffs that are wreaking havoc on everybody. So even if he had done something, he's taking credit for essentially still having us in the red. But the fact that he didn't actually give us any money, shows that he is a charlatan. He is someone who requires people not to be paying attention, and he requires people like the Democrats to say there are moderate Republicans and there are MAGA Republicans. But there is no such thing in this modern world, right? They're all supportive of Trump and they're all supportive of what he does. And I think a permission structure is often granted to people like Lota saying, oh, there'll be a moderate check on Trump. They know Wall Street, but they're small business guys. But this guy's not. He does whatever he's told and he lies. I mean, the fact that we have a congressman who's just so openly lying about saying that he put money back in our pockets when he is been robbing us blind. He's been robbing veterans blind. He's been gutting the VA. He's been gutting everything, and he's doing nothing to protect
Yeah.
our shoreline. I think it speaks for itself. He's done a basically next to 0% good job. If that makes sense.
Yep. Um, Now, going into a little bit of the internet, social media, with taxes, right? There's this thing going out about not paying your taxes. And then what I've really seen, like somebody who already kind of went down the looking glass of this, is the only way to really do this would be for the states to withhold, to make a law that they collect the federal tax and then they can withhold it if the federal government isn't following through on the agreements that they have between the states and the federal government.
Hmm.
Um, what are your thoughts on that? And what and some other maybe financial ways that we can stand up against the federal government?
I haven't put a lot of thought into
Mhm.
the withholding of tax money. In all honesty, I don't think that would be a good idea at all. I mean, I understand the premise behind it. If you want to say, okay, like for instance, if we're illegally going to bomb Iran now, and we're going to start an offensive in an illegal war, you could say, not our tax money for that. I understand the sentiment behind it. I just don't
Right.
really see any way that plays out without a constitutional crisis and the Supreme Court just slapping it down on the shadow docket. So I think we need to be a bit more realistic's not the right word, because I'm not shutting it down like it's bad or anything like that, but I just think we have to be a bit more specific and intentional on like what we can do and what like we can't do. And so I don't really know the viability about that, completely honestly.
Okay.
Was I
Yeah,
don't know if there
no,
was a second part of that question. I'm sorry.
no, I think that's great.
I think that's
It's
fair.
kind of this, these weird things that we see on the internet, and it could worm into your brain and you think about it.
Hmm.
Let's see.
Um, Nick, we got some good questions over here
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
chat that I think we should probably um
Yeah, the GOP, is that the one? GOP
uh
has Project 2025 to provide
yeah.
a roadmap to turning our
Lucas, can you see
democracy into
that?
Have you given any thought to what we could do to better build back better guardrails to protect our democracy in the future?
Yeah. Well, I think this is an answer I really don't want to be vague, but there's, I think, so many different things so many different ways you can attack this question. Um, And I want to look at it from the angle of protecting our democracy. I think one thing that we've seen is the fact that the FBI has been collecting voter rolls and trying to blackmail states into giving up their voter lists is something that needs to be, well, it's illegal. It needs to be adjudicated upon, but it also needs to be something that there's a legislative answer to. I don't know what that is. But I gave a presentation on Project 2025 when I worked in this law firm, and basically what I overwhelmingly came away with is that, and is why it's a good question, is that they are just trying to soften everything slowly and slowly and slowly. They're trying to soften our system of Social Security so that one day they can declare it unable to fix and insolvent and do away with it. They're trying to soften our election laws so that one day the federal government can say we can come in and mandate what you do with the voting machines. So I think what you can do about Project 2025 is come up with a Project 2029. A progressive vision for saving America. We're in our 250th year, and it feels very cruel that this is the administration that we have in place for what should be a great celebration of our country and our democracy and the fact that it has endured and thrived. And but I think that what we can do is kind of take this anniversary and say, let's look back to our founders, let's look back to FDR, let's look back to Lincoln, let's look back to all the times when our democracy was at threatened. What can we learn from those things, and how can we build upon and expand upon the values and the amendments that were put forward? Because every coming generation shows you that the work of the previous generation was good, but it's never enough, and you need to keep building. And I think we need to have a Project 2029 that is equipped with constitutional amendments, laws we want to pass at the state level and the federal level, overturning Citizens United, getting dark money and super PACs out of politics, making sure that you create a system where the politicians are genuinely accountable to you, the voter and the constituent. And I don't want to, yeah, I know there's a lot of questions, so I'll just say we need to create a Project 2029. What we put in it will be a democratic debate, I guess.
Follow up to that. Would you be for judicial term limits, Supreme Court judicial term limits?
Yeah, yeah. I would be in favor of term limits for members of Congress and the Senate as well.
Excellent.
I don't think
Um,
I don't think that's the only problem. I think money in politics is the biggest problem, but I think all remedies are good. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nick, we have a question here from an undecided voter who has
Yes, I
released it.
see
I
there's
think
actually
those are
three
some
different
great,
questions,
yeah,
right?
those are some great
Yeah,
questions
that's
to
what I've
pose.
got it queued up
Great,
right here.
great.
What will you do to regulate big tech and stop AI data centers from polluting our water? I'd go so far as even to being like limiting to ensuring that the communities where these data centers are actually put at want them there.
Hmm.
Um, right?
Yeah. So I have this whole question here. I can go through each little point quickly.
Thanks.
So what will I do to regulate big tech? I think this is something that's close to my heart because I grew up on social media basically, for all but most of my life, and I saw the way that I remember being a kid and seeing like ISIS videos, and I was like 12, and just effed me up mentally, kind of, and the way that it has created large scale body dysmorphia for men and women, of young ages, but also of all ages. To be completely honest, it's set standards of beauty and I guess, social activity that are not real, but also damaging to young people. And I think one thing you need to do to regulate them is hold a lot of these platforms accountable for the damage that they have done, whether it be to democracy, like Facebook allowing on both sides allowing misinformation and allowing bots and allowing other countries to interfere, us as well, to interfere in elections using social media. I think that's wrong. The way you regulate big tech is uh, it's a monopoly, if that makes sense. And I think something that I really think is important is antitrust, right? I look at Amazon as big tech because it kind of is, but it also encompasses movies, groceries, kind of everything these days. And I think one thing you can really do to regulate big tech is to take away the centralized and localized power that it has by using antitrust law and introducing newer antitrust law for tech. Um, what will I do? Oh, the AI data centers as well. We just saw in New Jersey that a data center, I think it was, I don't remember the exact city in Jersey it was, but a data center was rejected because the people overwhelmingly came forward and came to the city council and just said enough is enough. Now we need to have people at the federal level who are advocates for this, which is what I will be because, the fact that we have villages, towns, neighborhoods cleared out, or in the event that they aren't cleared out, these data centers still being built in those areas, destroying the water quality, polluting, also, creating like radiation and cancer threats as well. Just think the entire thing is very destructive. And
Mhm.
if AI was being massively used to try and cure diseases and do things that weren't like slop dating apps and ways to eliminate blue and white collar jobs, I might be a bit more sympathetic towards it. But as we always know in the system that we live in, the billionaires want to maximize profit. And the way they're going to do that is by killing our planet, building these data centers, and putting out, grok and the gross stuff that Elon Musk has been doing, you know, I'm not even going to get into it, but AI has not been an overwhelmingly positive development for humanity yet. The jury's out and the verdict is yet to be delivered, but I think what we're seeing is that it's heading in a negative direction. So that's my stance on that. Um, Someone says, "Will I continue to send blank checks to Israel and Ukraine?" No, I think it is my personal opinion that Israel is committing a genocide. I think that they are an ally of ours, but I do think that right now the weapons need to be cut off. I think that the fact that we continue to send them weapons basically means that they won't learn from the crimes that they're committing. And I think, people have, and I'm open about this, people have a disagreement sometimes with the word genocide. And I think they take it to mean that that's something that all Jewish people want. And I unequivocally say that I think anti-Semitism is on the rise and it's something that we need to fight against. But the actions of a state and people like Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, who openly say that they want to eliminate Palestinians for being Muslims and Palestinians, makes it an unequivocal genocide, in my opinion, and therefore they should be cut off. Ukraine, obviously, they were attacked, and they're an ally of ours, and we want to support democracy, but I think we also do need to do a better job at finding a way out and an exit strategy. And of course, the Trump administration controls foreign policy right now, so his relationship with Putin is something beyond most of our comprehensions. And so right now, I do support. Listen, I do support keeping them afloat, but I also do understand that it gets to a point with the amount of money we're sending overseas, and we need to find a way to end this war, stop killing on both sides, and that goes for both regions. And then my thoughts on anti-BDS laws. I don't support any laws that limit people's ability to protest or limits their right to free speech. So I'm not supportive of anti-BDS laws whatsoever. Thank you for your question.
Um, and then I'm going to kind of roll three questions here into one. Amy really wants to. What can you do to help protect our local waterways and wildlife? Um, I'll just leave it at that one.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, our former congressman is the person that is directly destroying our environment right now, which is a bit of a mind F for all of us, especially those of us who have met him and been around him and seen how much of a loser he is. Yes, I just saw the from Allison. Impeach Zeldin is the answer. Whether we have the votes for that or not is a different question. So, what do we do in the event that we can impeach the guy? Um, so we have to have these people tied up in committee every day. They need to live on Capitol Hill. They can't get a breather. We need to make sure that the American public knows, and we are on a complete offensive with regard to our environment. I think the environment is not something anymore that you can say, oh, you're going to alienate some independents and conservatives. Unless you have a tinfoil hat on, you know the environment and the climate has changed, and that's something that all people need to know explicitly is being not just, oh, they're not doing anything about it. They're actively attacking progress that we have made. And it's just not being enunciated enough that they are literally trying to take us back to the Stone Age in the name of oil profit, where even some oil companies now, who I will never defend, are saying this is a bit overboard, even for us, which is how you know that these people are nuts. So what we can do to protect the environment, hopefully if we win in 2028, the presidency, and I'm still in Congress, that has to be part of Project 2029, which is a massive project that tries to mitigate the damage that for a lot of us we do know is inevitable, but trying to tamp down on a lot of that damage. So um, yeah, I don't want to give too much of a run on because I could talk about that all day.
All right, I'm gonna jump over to campaigning here, and we got a decent amount of questions in regards to that. Locally, though, you've got the Suffolk County Police Department, and we've got some local unions. I believe I saw the Carpenters Union was out protesting at the county.
Yes.
What can you do to get their support?
So I think we've seen something interesting with labor in that policy wise, Democrats are tied much more closely with labor and have better policies. But we've seen sometimes labor unions have voted to, for instance, endorse Trump based on cultural issues, is how they put it oftentimes. Everybody has their opinions on whatever it may be. But I think listen, I don't think this applies for every union. That some unions are just going to vote to endorse a conservative, and you could try your best, and you can say everything. You can show up. You can be on the picket lines. You could say, as I do, that I support card check, the PRO Act, board level representation. Whatever it is that brings workers closer to the central command of power, which gives them a better and a more eagle-eye view of and decisions of like what actually happens in their jobs and their incomes with healthcare and other things. Um, but what I'm going to do is just go to every union, speak to them earnestly, tell them what I support, tell them that, you know, because a lot of times it's union leaders are at odds with union membership on issues of cultural relevance. We'll just say it that way. And you just have to go in there and speak honestly with people and not be afraid to get a bit of a ribbing from people that are going to say, "Oh, you support this crazy thing or that crazy thing," and you're going to have to shoot back at them and say, "No, dude, I'm a real person. I support your rights as a worker. I support your right to organize. I support your right to get paid well. I support your right to get health care. If you think this crazy thing you saw on TikTok is indicative of me when I'm standing here in the flesh telling you what I'm all about, then you can believe that. But I'm always going to show up 100 times out of 100, be real with people and give it to them straight. If they don't want to take it, they don't want to take it. After a certain point, you have to stop chasing people who don't want to be chased. If that makes sense.
Nice. Um, what do you think it's going to take to win this congressional district?
It's going to take us bringing out new voters. I am of the firm belief that we have a turnout problem. Um, Listen, we have people who have switched to the right, sure, but in terms of registration, we're about even. In terms of voters, we're about even, and we have a large swath of independents. And oh, I want to talk specifically about independents, right? Because I want to bring out lots of young Democrats who have felt disaffected and not voted, and other Democrats who have felt alienated from the process and not voted. But I think yes, someone said voter registration drives. Those are great, and I want to do those as well. But I'm looking at independents right now, and I'm looking at independents as people who are saying we're not married to a party. We just want to see who's the most competent, who is looking out for our interests the best, and who can get the job done the most. And what it's going to take is to win over independents. I've had Republicans and I've had independents show up to the several town halls that I've done so far. Some of them have varying policy identifications, and some of them, one of whom was a Republican who said, "I'm afraid of ICE, but I don't necessarily agree with you on everything." And I think what you have to do is convince people in this instant gratification world that you need to buy into something that you can work with. And I'm a person that you can work with. When it comes to matters of democracy, I think we should all agree. And if you don't agree with me on the fact that we need to have a secure democracy and you agree with ICE and these things, you're probably not going to be a Democrat or a Lucas voter. But for the people who are open to that, for the people who fear ICE, but also care about, as I said earlier, the cost of milk, diapers, gas, groceries writ large, childcare, housing. These might be independents, Democrats, even some Republicans, and you need to go to them, as I said with the unions, tell them what you're about, tell them that you understand, but also listen to what they're saying. Give them real solutions. I think a lot of times we've run campaigns that are just very platitude centric, like, oh, we're going to get the job done, we're going to work hard, we're going to beat Trump's butt. And it's like, okay, and then what? Right? Because a campaign is this much and the governance is this much. What you do when you govern is very important. And I think that we have voters that are so used to not hearing actual solutions that they just say, oh, okay, well, do I know there's a difference between Republicans and Democrats? Yes, but in practice, nothing really changes. And you need to show them that something will change if they vote for you.
Yeah. I think finding a way to get yourself in front of them, however it is. Natalie is asking the question. I'm going to ask the question a little different, Natalie. I'm going to say, if you were not running for Congress right now, what would
Mhm.
you be doing besides finishing school or just finishing up school, right?
Yeah, so I would have finished law school and I would probably go back to, would I have been hired? Is it different? No, that's up to the attorneys at the firm, but I would probably go back to the same civil rights firm that I worked at in Hempstead. I worked for Fred Brewington, the law offices of Fred Brewington. We did great work in a number of different fields that cover civil rights. I've worked with people with special needs. I've worked with people who have been racially discriminated against. I've worked with police officers who have been discriminated against based on disability. And those experiences have given me a sense of what it's like to fight for justice in the here and now and to actually walk the walk. And I'll answer the question because I think it is a good question as written, because it is a question I do get. If I don't win, am I going to disappear like everybody else? And the answer is no. Um, I got into politics in Suffolk long ago before I ever thought I actually wanted to run. I used to be like, I'm not running. That's a bunch of BS. Like, that's for other people. That's for people with like a much bigger ego than I have. And then I realized, like, no, sometimes leadership comes to you and you want to lead, and it's not about that all politicians are arrogant. It's like, oh, no, actually, you want to show people that serving is really still a real thing, and that there are people you can look up to, but also look to for help and assistance and a partnership. And that's what I want to do with, and that's what I want to achieve.
Awesome. Lucas, thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank you
answer all of
guys.
our questions. I'm sure we didn't get every question on the list, but hopefully we'll be able to do it again. I'm going to throw it over to Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That was great.
Thank
I
you
just
guys.
Yeah, I know we're tight up against the 9 p.m. stop here, but there was a question. Our one of our members, Pat, in the beginning, you saw she's at DC and she just met with Lalota and others there, and I think her question was interesting. Like, what experience do you have? She feels like she spent the day or 2 days in DC. It was kind of through the ringer of the political
Right.
grind there. And she's wondering, are you prepared for that? And how do you prepare for that? Yeah.
So, yeah, so I did see her question earlier. I have not directly worked in DC, because I know she said a lot of people go there with good intentions and sort of get crushed in the meat grinder. I think was the exact phrase that she
Yeah.
used. And it's real, it's true. I've worked in a office out here on Long Island when I worked for Congresswoman Grace Meng in Queens. And even that was a lot. There's a lot of churn in the office. There's a lot going on. And to run your own office, to be the center of an office in DC with a million things being thrown at you is something that I think a lot of people would be hesitant to engage in or to deal with. But the relevant experiences I have, again, these are much smaller than working in or being a congressperson, but I've done a lot of organizing. I've done a lot of work in law. I've always been very hands-on with research and a high level of just activity on my plate. This is how I've lived my life. It's just how I am as a person. I work better when there's a lot going on. And how am I sure I'm going to be able to handle it? Like, you're so confident you're going to go there. How you're not going to get chewed up? I'm a person, again, as I said earlier, who knows what they don't know as well, who's not going to be a know-it-all and say, oh, I'm the congressperson. I got elected. Clearly, I know everything, and I'm not going to seek help. I'm not going to hire people who are going to challenge me. I think if you spoke to my campaign manager and people on my team, they will say they're the first people to challenge me, and I'm always the first person to listen because I really do want to work with people who hold me accountable, want to work with good, seasoned people in the office who have the same policy intentions as me, but also have experience there, right? It's for every person, and my campaign manager has said it. Nobody knows what it's like to be a congressperson until they get into the job. There's a level of on-the-job training for every single person. But I think lessening the load and the fall by having experience, but also, like I said, good intentioned with regard to policy people, showing you along. I think, Zoran, whether you guys like him or not, he is someone who said, okay, I won, but I don't have necessarily experience. So I'm bringing in a deputy mayor who has a lot of experience. That's how I'm going to run my office. My chief of staff will be someone who's experienced, will make sure that no stone is left unturned because it will be an awesome and great responsibility. And it's something that I would not take lightly. And should I win, I will probably be in shell shock for like a week that I have been granted this opportunity by you guys, because a year and a half ago, I was not known by anyone and I was just, working in a law office. And so for me, it's a very humbling experience thus far anyway. And should I win, like, you guys have my absolute word that not only will the wheels be kept on the train, but the train will be um, good and will deliver.
Thanks, Lucas. I guess maybe I should ask this at the top, but and I know we got like 2 minutes left here. But do you
No
know,
worries.
do you know like how you differ in policy from your challenger right now, like Gallant, where you guys have differences? And that leads to, are you having any debates? Um,
Yes, I know. I saw that question.
yeah,
Um, as for debates, right now I assume it's customary to have at least one. I'm much more than willing to have one. We've had several forums so far where we've both been on display, I guess if that makes sense. They're not as plentiful as perhaps they should be, but again, we as candidates don't organize them. Um, so I don't know when that is. The second I find out, I'll blast it out to everybody, make sure everybody knows. But
maybe we could do it for it. Maybe we could do that.
please do. I'd be more than happy to do that with you guys. Um, as for where we differ, again, you know, without coming off as like antagonistic, right? I know it's a primary,
Right.
so there will be a point where we are. I my policies haven't changed, and I haven't needed like a whole consultant team or listening tour to know what I believe in. And I've had my policies right there from the get-go. I've always believed in Medicare for all. I've always believed in the child tax credit and paid leave, whether it's sick leave or parental leave. I've always believed in a lot of these things. Like I said, repealing the Fair Cloth Amendment to increase federal spending in affordable housing. These are things I've always believed in, and so it's hard to really know where he stands on certain policies sometimes, if I'm being completely honest, because I don't always know what they are. Which, that's why I try to be very intentional and specific with what I believe in. So there are as little questions as possible with regard to what I actually believe in. So I guess the way I'll answer that is just say, like, I'm an open book with what I believe in, and I think that probably is the biggest differentiating factor.
Yeah, that's refreshing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I think we're right up at 9 o'clock. I just want to thank you again for coming here and
Yes,
talking to
thank
us,
you guys so
spending the
much.
time in an evening. I'm sure it's a very busy time for you. So thank you. And I want to thank everybody who came here and attended. It shows, that, like I said at the beginning, this is the most registrants we've ever gotten for one of our events. So people are really
Thank you guys.
energized and want to be involved and and want to support you or the other Democratic person who's running. So with that being said, Indivisible doesn't necessarily support an individual candidate. So we just
Right.
wanted to we are letting everybody know here that on March 13th at 8 p.m. we'll have a meeting with Chris Gallant, a similar format as this. And then maybe we'll work with you, Lucas, to see if we can set up a third
Please.
event
Yeah.
where it's where we bring you two together.
Allison, I think the county
really
center on Riverhead would be perfect for that, for the East End. It's important for the East Enders to be included and not just always up the island. So, it's the county seat out here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Natalie. Okay, so I'll just finish off by saying we hope to see you, all of you, and you, Lucas, at the No Kings 3 event. We
Yes.
specifically with Natalie, who was just speaking, we are running or helping to organize the 9 to 11 in Riverhead on No Kings, March 28th, as well as the 12 to 2 in Hampton Bays. So
Okay.
we hope to see you and everybody else on this call out there, and bring your friends.
You one up on Chris Gallant on that because he's on active duty that weekend.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, we hope to see you out there,
Lucas.
Lucas. I know you've been out and about, so we appreciate
I
seeing
try
you.
and go to everything, so
Good.
I'll definitely make it out there.
Thank you. We would appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you
Okay.
guys so much.
Corrine, Nick, anything else, or are we good? Okay. Thank you so much, Lucas. It was
Thank you so much, Lucas.
Thank you guys.
really a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a
We'll
great
see you
night,
again
guys.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.